All right, awesome. So, this is our third interview. Adam, it is. I said this right when I saw you, and you also said the same. But it is great to see you. Like it really has been too long. This is honestly my favorite part of these interviews is just being able to catch up with people. And I would love to obviously get dinner and stuff when you're in the area. But I want you to just start off and kind of tell me a little bit about yourself, right? So you could talk about before you worked with Cutco, and then you could talk about what you've been doing since you graduated and moved on. And
Yeah.
I'll give you the floor. It is yours.
Sweet. No, I appreciate it, Owen. You know, you're one of my favorite managers from the get-go, and I'm not just saying this because you invited me on to do this with you, and kind of give the platform and all that. But it really is a pleasure to see you. I'm excited to kind of share the story and hopefully give a great testimonial for everything that goes along with it, to help you and support you with what you have going on. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised West Orange, New Jersey. Graduated high school class of 2014 at West Orange High. Went to school at the University of Rhode Island. Graduated in 18. Before Cutco, super introverted. And you'll hear me say a lot of stuff throughout this. And I'm sure just like how I'm talking already, you'll be like, nah, like this kid wasn't introverted. He's probably just doing it for the testimonial. But I delivered pizzas at Star Tavern. I delivered pizzas all over Livingston.
Our
So like,
tavern, I've heard, is really good.
dude, great pizza. Great pizza in West Orange. Might be one of the best in New Jersey, regardless of fact. But like didn't have any experience. Like I like had like a pretty good network. Like I grew up in West Orange, like middle class family, like right in the middle of the road. Like had to work for what I had. Like I didn't have a silver spoon or anything like that, which, I think like that's how I prefer things. Even though I come from, again, like a middle class, like a little bit upper middle class family is what I'd consider it looking back on my life, at least growing up. But I graduated with University of Rhode Island, class of 2018. I started with Cutco, and again, we're probably going to get to some of this anyway, so I'll speed run through it a little bit just to give you an overview. We can chop it up how you want. But I started with Cutco, I think it was summer of my sophomore year, sold one summer, started in Morris. I think we were in, where were we? We were in,
Were we in Cedar Knolls in Hanover?
yeah, I think we were in Cedar Knolls
Yeah,
or something along those
yeah,
lines.
yeah.
Small office. We were a great team. Like I think we were coming off probably one of the best years that we ever had. I think 2014, like the top 10, there was like eight or nine Morris reps that were in like top of SC1, top of SC2. So I came in at a great time. But again, I was super introverted. Like I had a good network. So that was like a big part of the process, is like leveraging your network, getting familiar with going and talking to people that you feel comfortable with. So that was a great adjustment for me. And I built my book business out from there. I think everybody at Cutco knows if you're one day or one weekend or a year in and you're 2, 5, 10 year alumni, you probably have a good understanding of that. But I sold one summer, I branched the next. I went to school at the University of Rhode Island, so I wasn't fortunate to do Leadership Academy under Owen. And well, I did. Owen was great for Leadership Academy and everything like that. But I was constantly going back and forth. Everybody was super flexible. But since then, now I graduated in 18. I worked ADP, getting great like entry level like sales opportunity for 2.5 years, and I've been recruiting now 4.5 years for the latter part of my career. I've recruited at Google. I've hired software engineers at the biggest boom in tech in probably the last 5, 10 years we've ever seen, and most recently actually been recruiting salespeople. So it's been really exciting and excited to talk about it.
So, well, you were just telling me that you're working with a startup, and that the company's really growing. What made you go that path?
Yeah, I think it was a few different things for me. Part of it was I was actually laid off from Google in their first round, along with 12, 15,000 other
Yeah.
people and tens of thousands of other people after that. So I think that was a big point of inflection in my moment, in my
I
career, and a
think
lot
that
of other
actually
people as
you
well.
as a recruiter were too good at your job, and they overhired so much that they were like, wait, well, maybe we don't need these people.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the biggest question mark that a lot of people have in regards to AI and reduction in force and how they're going to reallocate and things like that. And I think a lot of people have a lot of opinion on that. I think we could probably talk for hours just on that topic specifically, but that was a big inflection point for myself. Would I go back to Google? It have to be situational. I'll be totally honest. But again, great people there, fantastic what they're doing. But I think what led to me doing the startup route that I'm in right now is a couple things. One, they're incredibly mission oriented. I work in the mental health space right now. Mental health is something that's incredibly important to me. That checked the box for me immediately. I didn't have anything that was super mission oriented in my experience. Everything helped me build my career, which I'm incredibly thankful for. This is the first time I've actually had that mission orientation factor, and the fact of working within my community and helping sales reps build their own community, things like that. That was important to me. But I think after that was just the fact that I was coming into a much smaller team, which was going to help me increase my scope. I was working in a startup, mind you, that, again, like, not to talk about funding or anything like that, but early stage, let's just say early stage. And they didn't have a lot of red tape. They didn't have a lot of departmental kind of taboos, or, like, different departments where, like, you weren't allowed to touch certain things. So that was a big thing for me as well. And just the leadership was there at the time, and it's still growing, and they've hired a lot. And I think they went from, they're 4 years old now. They started at 600 when I was there. We're now closer to 1,500. We're in 32 states. Now we're closer to 38 states. So I've gotten to see a lot, and I've gotten to be part of launching new markets, seeing my reps get promoted, seeing folks do really well and take on all this responsibility. So I think it's just, the final piece of it is being able to see that impact of who you hire at scale, not just hiring somebody in and seeing them on LinkedIn, kind of, maybe in Mountain View, or they're in New York, or they're in Texas, or wherever they are. But at Charlie Health, I've hired dozens of salespeople, and you get to actually see exactly what they're doing, and you get to really keep that relationship with them, which is pretty much all this role really is: recruiting and
That's
sales.
awesome. I love the purpose thing. I think that that's so important, is having something that motivates you beyond obviously money, and also to actually hear that obviously a lot of startups, they need to kind of build. A lot of times people have an idea or like a product, and then they might not have that leadership, and it's awesome that you guys have that. But so in terms of your vector story, a few questions. I'll let you take it away and answer them however you want. What, when you started, obviously you said you didn't really have any sales experience. How did you hear about the job? What were your initial thoughts? Why did you try it? And then I would say a great way to wrap that up is like, how has it impacted you?
Yeah. So I want to make sure that I hit all of those. So I'm going to probably answer the first two, and you're going to remind me as I'm going. So I can, like, properly double click into stuff, and I can probably answer each one of them. So let's say the first two. What were my initial thoughts, and how did I find out about the job? Cool. So found out about the job through somebody I went to school with, Anthony Rampone. We were
Yeah,
same program at the University of Rhode Island. We were same major, same minor. We both were in Greek life together, both had same aspirations, things of that nature. So that's how I found out about the job. We had very good relationship with one another. We both had a lot of credibility. We both knew we wanted to be in sales after school. So he had started, I think, like a year or two before me. And that was like a big thing for me, because, like, this is when I was in my, like, super competitive era. It's like, damn, like, I don't want anybody to have a leg up on me. So this is when I was like, yeah, like, I really need to, like, get on my stuff. So that's how I found out about the job. First impressions of the job, I knew it was sales. I knew what I was stepping into. So I wasn't super afraid of the responsibility. I think sometimes people are like, like, why do I have to sell to my friends and my family? That sounds like scheme-esque. It's like, I don't know what you want me to say, stuff like that. But I think to the degree of like, like, why do I have to do that? But the program's there for a reason. I've lived and died by the mantra, and some of the stuff you told me 8, 9 years ago, however long it is. The program works if you follow the program to some degree. So if all these people have had all the success, and I'm a broke college student, I need some money, and
How do
that
you
was a
think,
big piece of it.
from your perspective, why is it important for our reps to start with their, like, people that they have a connection with?
Ultimately, that's just where you're going to have the most level of confidence. I think it's one thing if you're selling an enterprise, or you're selling a service, something that you, like, don't need to put, like, your own personal brand or anything like that behind. But that is what Cutco is at the end of the day. It's a product, and it's, again, fantastic product, and I still have it to this day. I know a lot of my clients are still super happy, but it truthfully is the best possible way for you to start out. Because if you start off behind a booth at the New Jersey State Fair and you're getting hammered with questions, you're going to clam up. If you don't have sales experience, 3 days of training, 3 weeks of training, 3 years of training, maybe 3 years of training, but 3 days, 3 weeks of training, you're not going to be able to do that. I know plenty of sales programs, plenty of sales colleges, plenty of entry-level sales trainee programs where you get great experience, but I don't think there's anything you can get in such a short frame of time where you can have such a measurable, impactful level of success in 10 days. You guys have that fast start program, I'm sure, still 10 days,
It's 13 now. They get
13.
13 days. Yeah.
Oh, so now you guys got more opportunity to make more
A
money
little,
and get
a little
more
more
growth
time to
stuff.
win stuff. Yeah. but that's awesome. I say all the time, when I started, I say in training every week that I'm like, if you're nervous, that's normal, right? It would be less normal if you were like, no, I've been selling knives my whole life, right? I'd be like,
I'd be more scared for that dude in
yeah, I'd
training.
be
Like,
like, I don't know if I should give you knives. Like, what are you doing selling knives? But the reality is, the initial presentations aren't necessarily about the sales. It's
no,
about the experience and the connections. And
right.
we take people and put them in a 2 or 3 day training, where like the reality is, the goal isn't for someone to be perfect. It's for them to be competent, right? For them to know what they need to know, because they're sitting down with people they have a connection with. So they have a larger area of opportunity to make mistakes and learn in a way that is very, conducive for their long-term success, and that type of stuff. So I love that. In what ways would you say the job impacted you?
I think to not to use the same exact word that you just used in your little anecdote, Owen, but I think it was the confidence factor. Like I said, I was introverted. I didn't have experience. I knew what I wanted to do, and I needed to I knew that I wanted sales after college to clarify, and I needed to fill, not to sound like clickbaity, but I needed to fill a gap in my experience that I didn't have. It's one thing to get involved in campus. It's one thing to join Greek life. It's another thing to join business organizations. It's another thing to join the American Marketing Association. I was a marketing major, so that was important to me. Went on a trip, did a case study, all that stuff. But all that stuff was great, and it allowed me to have the experience and build the connection. So when I started interviewing at Google and ADP, like I knew how to build the relationship and establish the experience and the connection. But
I was
if I
about
didn't,
to say, I think that even more so than the resume experience you got, the growth and the person that you became, because like one of my favorite things about these catching up is just seeing like how badass, the people that I met you. What, you were a sophomore, junior in college,
this is maybe like
and
2016, 2017.
yeah, and it's like, but after a year, and then obviously as a branch, like you were a completely different version of yourself in terms of your confidence and your
100%.
ability to. And I think that obviously the resume experience is great, but just the person that you become in that process, it just, when you get in front of people, it's so much easier for you to execute at a high level and really
100%.
impress.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that like still stands out with me to this day is it gives you self-awareness. Confidence is one thing, experience and resume experience is another. But I think just the way that like if you sell like one summer or one spring break or one like winter break and that's like the last you ever do with Cutco, fine. Like you'll get the Cutco on your resume, like that'll help you get your first job, like whether that's in as a nurse, whether that's a medical professional, whether that's a salesperson, whatever. But I think when you stay longer and you build that consistency, you can show that you grow. I talk to people all the time that are junior salespeople, and they're like, I hire them just because they had 6 years of experience at Lululemon or 7 years of experience at Cutco, just because they stayed through and they had good experience. But it's because of those developmental things at Cutco that I don't know if we're going to get into, but things like Leadership Academy, things like the development conferences, things like almost pushing you outside your boundary zone to build rapport with people that you have no idea about, talk and present on topics you have no idea about. And that's how you learn, especially when you're a sophomore, a freshman in college, a junior in college. Heck, I wish I could have started Cutco when I was a junior in high school if I could. I don't think you guys can
I
hire
say
people that
I
are under
say that
20,
all the
that
time.
are under 18.
I wish before I went to college, I actually learned how to like set a schedule and plan and set goals for myself and hold myself accountable. Like for me, that was like the biggest thing that I've gained working here is those things. I always say no matter what you're good at, you might be good at the structure aspect, which I wasn't. But typically, those people who are very structured aren't as confident in their communication and extrovert, that type of stuff. And all of those are things that you want to get good at as early in life as possible, because they will enhance the future quality of your life in every aspect.
Completely
So,
agree.
in terms of like when you moved on and you were interviewing, how did recruiters respond when they saw vector experience on your resume?
I'll start just by saying when I interviewed at ADP right after school, right when I was about to graduate. I was one of those people that interviewed right before I was about to graduate because I wasn't in investment banking, like I wasn't in the finance world, so like they like you don't get the opportunity to interview that early. But I was going for sales, so I know that that's relevant for a lot of people that come into Cutco that will probably see this. So I was interviewing at ADP, Cintas, Paycom, Enterprise, Rent a Car, and a few others. But again, like all big names, Cutco is very, very well known. It's
I was
very
gonna
well
say
known.
all of those love Cutco people.
And as somebody that recruits salespeople right now, anytime I see somebody with Cutco on their resume, it turns into a name game. Like I talked to somebody when I was recruiting in Philly, and it immediately turned into, oh, cool. Like, do you know Stacey Barton and Greg Cothran? Oh, you don't? Were you that good? Did you like it? It almost kind of turned into that. It was like, oh, like you're from like the New York City, like tri-state area, like on the Jersey side. Oh, do you know Owen Trapp? Why don't you know Owen Trapp? Were you not there long enough? Did you not take training seriously? Did you not do something to stand out? Like that sort of stuff. And again, that's one thing, but it goes back to the primary subject of like Cutco is very well known. And I was like very integrated in my community. I knew how to build rapport. I knew how to kind of play the name game and figure out like, hey, like who do you know in the area, which comes back to asking for referrals, doing stuff you're not comfortable with, stuff like that. Um, Building rapport, talking about discovery, talking about relationship building, talking about how to actually establish a genuine, authentic connection with someone, which is all that rapport is. That's literally the name of the game, being in somebody's home and talking to them about knives, which sounds really weird. And no, again, like,
You want to know what's so
it
funny
could
to
be
me?
weird.
I say this all the time. The amount of people that have tried to recruit me and have said something like, if you could sell knives, you could sell anything. And it's funny because Cutco is like almost the easiest thing to sell.
I think it's
And
still the easiest thing to sell. That like I'm what 8 years of experience now. I sold ADP solutions. I sold staffing solutions. And everything since then has really just been like core recruiting. Like I sell software engineering jobs. I sell sale jobs now to people. But I think Cutco is still probably the easiest thing. Like if I went to somebody that like all these like friends that I have now, if I went to their parents, like I've got friends that are like in the target demographic now, like 30 plus, own a home. What's the other, you know what I mean? Like they're in
like
the target
married,
demographic. Married, yeah.
married.
Like
Yeah.
that kind of describes like my age and my friend group now. So like I could probably go to them and they weren't all like Stein, like don't sell knives to me. Like I already know the pitch and like I'll talk to you like when I want to buy some knives, probably send it to one of your reps or you, Owen. But like it's not that hard to sell. It's really not.
It's the reality is that I think that a lot of people don't understand. The product is what makes the sales program work. You know, people don't need to, they need to learn the basics, but it's like Cutco has been around since 1949. It's manufactured in upstate New York, and it's literally guaranteed forever. So it's something that I've sat down with customers that I sat down with a customer a couple weeks ago who had her mother's set of Cutco that was 67 years old. And it's like, and she's using something that her mother bought like 67 years ago. And I think she had it sharpened twice. It was the second time she had it sharpened. It was very dull. I'm not gonna lie
Yeah.
to you. It needed to be sharpened.
Oh, sure. Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm sure she
But
didn't want. I'm sure she didn't want the handles replaced, though. I'm sure that stuff was antique.
well, they can do it where they won't replace it. They just
Okay.
sharpen it. That's like one of the options if they send it in. But like it's just I was like, what else is there that you can use basically every day today that your mom was using pretty much every day 67 years ago? Like, can't really think of much. Like
No,
there really
can't
isn't
think of
that
much.
much. And yeah,
That's a
so
product, not a service. Yeah.
yeah. Well, even a service. What is a service that you would use 67 years later?
No. Yeah. I take that. I take that piece back. I mean, 67 years
Yeah.
later, no, can't think of
Once,
much else that's out there.
once I was running training, right? And this kid, I was like, guys, what can you buy once, use every day, never replace? And this like Russian kid, right? With like a thick Russian accent, he was like, a turtle, right? And I'm like, a what? And he was like, a turtle. And I'm like, what are you saying? And he was like, a turtle. And I'm like, are you saying a turtle? And he's like, yeah, my friend got turtle from grandma and it's like 70 years old. And I was like, I think that might be a tortoise, right? I don't know. I don't know. And he was like, no, in Russia, we know have tortoise. And I was like, well, I have bad news. I don't know how much longer this 70-year-old turtle is going to live,
No.
but yeah, there isn't that much. So, what advice would you give to someone who's considering trying the position out, that's unsure of if they want to do sales, or unsure of if this is the right opportunity for them?
I think you've just got to take some level of action, as cheesy as that sounds. I mean, you can try it out for 3 days, you can try it out for a week, you can try it out for 2, 3 weeks, 13 days. It sounds like it is now. And at the
Yeah,
very least, you've got it on your resume. You've went through the sales training. I think if you go through it for one summer, what do you go to? SC1, SC2, potentially go to Olean. That's in the fall still, I'm sure. So like you get all that leadership development and all that self awareness and the network that you build, even if you just did it for like the summer, like just the people that you meet and the ideas that you can surround yourself with. Again, like some of it is like out there. Like if you're not, if you don't have an entrepreneurial mindset, like some of this stuff, like you got like some of the people that work in Cutco are definitely a different cloth, which I think like are still fantastic. They go on to start some of the best businesses ever, like Travis Kalanick, who started Uber. I'm sure that's probably an alum that's still like pretty well respected
yeah.
within Cutco. But
But
I
I
would
I
say,
love that. I say all the time, just because somebody it tries the position doesn't mean that it's something that they need to do forever. Where
yeah,
like my mindset when I started was I'm going to try it for 2 weeks, and the worst case scenario is I could put professional sales training on a resume. I could actually find out if it's a good fit for me based on firsthand
figure out if you
experience.
even like sales.
Yeah. And then if it's not, big deal. I'm in the same place I was 2 weeks before, but at least I'm not like wondering because I experienced, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's another question is, let's say someone is getting started with us, right? They're about to start over winter break. And they really want to like just maximize the opportunity. What advice would you give to that person to really just crush their experience here?
Yeah, I think you've got to take the advice from somebody of 8 years ago. That's if you look at my resume and you look at my LinkedIn and you see what I've done now, and you just take my word for it, genuinely from the way that I'm talking right now, that I worked at ADP, I've worked at Google, I'm working in a fast-growth startup right now. Like not to like boast about like where I'm at right now, but this is all possible just because of the experience that I got at Cutco. I wouldn't be the same person, wouldn't have the confidence, wouldn't have had the resume experience to get to ADP, wouldn't have had Aerotech without ADP, wouldn't have had Google without Aerotech and ADP, so on and so forth. But here's what I would do. Like if I were like starting over again, like if I were gonna really just max out like what I could, one, I would have started way earlier, but I can't do anything about that now. So that's just the first thing that I would suggest. Again, like if you take 2 weeks to like think about it, 3 weeks to think about it, like again, like 2, 3 weeks, like winter break's already over. So like just think quick. That would be my first option on it. But let's assume you're already through the interview process, you're sitting in training. Just Owen, like you say it all the time, and I'm sure you still do, and like it echoes in my head. Every employer that I've been, the program works if you just work the program. It's as simple as it sounds, but I promise you, like it sounds so simple. It
It's
works.
funny because so a past rep from 2005 who just came back, he sold and then he ran a branch and he moved on, and he was like, and we went through our training. He's like 39. He had been doing tech sales, and he's like, I see some of the stuff that people are doing. Like we have a rep this year who's on pace to hit $2 million in sales, which is
Wow,
you know,
wild.
I'll take three of them in my office. I wouldn't be upset about that at all. And he was like, the thing that's always stuck with me is that the training program here is so like fine tuned where it's like you have everything that you need. You have everything that you need, right? Like and I think that a lot of that also is tied to, one of the things I say to reps all the time is, hey, if you're not successful, I'm not successful, right? So like I go out of my way to make sure that I'm giving you the right tools that are going to help you, crush the job and grow and that type of stuff. And obviously everyone's different, but yeah, if someone just commits to learning it the right way, it's all
Mhm.
there for them, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And even as you were talking about, the one thing that I wrote down was the program is so fine tuned that somebody with no experience and no knowledge of their own network or no knowledge of their own skill that they have, they probably don't even realize. That's what the program brings out of them. And I feel like the longer you stay at Cutco, and the reason that I think I stayed there so long, 2 years, like had the opportunity to, and I moved on when I had something that I couldn't say no to, was what I needed at that point in my life. But the longer that you get there, it compounds. And I truthfully believe, like I've been at some great organizations, but I do think one, the training, two, the onboarding, and three, just the constant learning and development that you get at Cutco, more specifically on the third, the learning and development. Again, a big buzzword, something you see a lot of people developing, a lot of people investing a lot of money in, especially big tech companies, especially big startups. Again, companies that I've worked for, that I see them starting to invest once they're at a certain stage or they're at a certain phase in business or a certain phase in innovation. Cutco's had it figured out for so long. And it's like just like if you just stayed a little bit longer, you started a little bit earlier, or you took it a little bit more serious when you were in the training program, you were broke in college, like hopefully like this impacts me like one or two people. It was like thinking about like taking like that internship at enterprise, like if you're like ready to go branch and like then you want to intern at enterprise, like just go branch, like you get better experience anyway. Enterprise will hire you like at the end of your college like career anyway. Not that you want to go work at enterprise anyway. Like if you have this experience at Cutco, like you could go launch and start at Oracle, you could go launch and start at ADP or Paycom or Gartner or whatever. Like enterprise is a great program, Cintas are a great program, ADP is a great program, but and again, like nothing wrong with any of those programs, but if you've already got all of that at Cutco, sometimes it's a little bit better
I
in my
also
view.
I also think that almost like branch isn't even, it is a program, but it's more so like just you get thrown into actually having to run your own business. Like it's
Oh yeah.
like, you have.
That's all I sold on my interviews for like my first like first like six interviews. That's all I talked about. And I remember going into my internship advisor's office. This wasn't super relevant, but I went into my internships advisor's office to like, like when because you can get school credit for it. And I think like I followed a talk track or something like that, and I like sat down with the advisor because I had a leadership studies minor, and like it was very fluid. I could get as many credits as I wanted for it. I kind of just explained to him like what I did as a branch, and I'm sure everybody listening to this call or will listen to this call knows what branch is. He said I could have gotten like 12 credits for it. I took it for three just because I already paid for the credits, but like it's that crazy level of an experience.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple topics. You could choose from any of them. If
Yeah.
you, what tips would you have for a rep to get the most out of training? So, like, it could be a general tip. It could be, their names list, like networking. It could be setting up their first weekend or maximizing their fast start or just like attacking the phones and booking a lot of appointments. What would be one of those areas that you have you know, some tip that you could pass on?
Yeah, just like in that specific arena of like tips for like getting the most out of training from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say I think all of them are important. Attacking your first week, like hitting the phones, like all that's important. That's just a product of taking action. I'm sure nobody would be that surprised if I said like you got to work hard if you're going to get the results that you want. I don't know if that's anything like super crazy or unrealistic or rocket shippy, but I do think the aspect of networking is probably the most important facet of things. I mean, I still interview to this day where like I interview around like every few months, like like once or twice a year, just like resharpen my own skills because interviewing is quite frankly a skill. And going back to the networking aspect of things, I went in an interview, got to the end of the process, and we just mutually decided like it wasn't a good fit. I could have taken it if I wanted to. I just decided to stay where I was at. Again, like we're gonna chop this up, like we're only gonna put it in certain places, which is why I'm okay saying this out loud. But the company was the reason why I had such a good relationship with them was because of somebody named Jimmy Goff that I started with 7, 8 years ago. That in the first round of the interview, I dropped the name. He was like, "Oh, you remember Jimmy from Cutco?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah. I know Jimmy's not there anymore, but Jimmy and I were boys. We came up in the business together." So immediately, I shifted the conversation from the recruiting experience that I had because it was a recruiting role. This wasn't even a sales job. This is a recruiting role. But the fact that I had a name to drop and just the idea of like doing your research and catering and talking to certain people in a certain way. But the crux of it was networking. If I didn't know Jimmy, chances are I wouldn't have had a name to drop, and that wouldn't have carried me so far in the process. I went through, I think, like three different partner interviews, like high level, like partner principal people. And then I met like another three or four people on the team. And thank goodness Jimmy had a good track record. Again, he's not there anymore. Jimmy's great. I still talk to him from time to time. But networking can truthfully be a gift if you just know how to do it the correct way. And again, like I said earlier, the longer you stay at Cutco, the more that network grows and the more you get access to other types of people like Owen, like Earl, like Albert, like people like that can really write you a letter of recommendation, a President's Club letter, which means something completely different at Cutco than it does at a company like ADP, where it's like the golden opportunity, like the golden contest, stuff like that. And that's a way to get recruiters' eyes and attention. President's Club is a big buzzword, so you can put that in your LinkedIn, and then the recruiter will put it in keywords, and that'll show up, and they'll immediately start thinking like, oh, like this guy is like a super top performer, like stuff like that. But to get back to your initial question, like tips for getting the most out of training, networking. Hopefully that was clear.
Yeah. So one of the things that actually I've heard Justin Ludwig and Kyle Preeman say that recently that I didn't really think about is just because someone knows who you are doesn't necessarily mean that you are in their network. And that when you start with people that you know and you have to go out and sit down with, a friend's dad, that actually establishes that relationship to the point where you could call back to that person and use that to network.
And ask
Where
for a
like,
favor or
yeah,
ask for an instruction.
and you're not just like the kid that hangs out with their friend or their friend that hangs out with their kid. All of a sudden, now you've had a conversation with this person. They see ambition and skill set and those types of things, where it actually establishes the ability to connect that network. And I think that that's a really powerful concept. So I guess two last things. I'm just gonna ask. Are there any like sales tips you have? It could be closing, phoning, referrals. What do you think? A tip that you maybe wish you knew sooner. It could be
I think
any of
even
those areas.
yeah, I think like, and again, like I'm like a big like pen and paper person, so like I forget like in an instance, like I always have to write stuff down. But again, like what I said earlier, all three of them are important. Closing and phoning, like again, like probably wouldn't be like that rocket sciencey, like again, close. Actually, you know what? I was gonna say referrals, and I think that's the business part that like I always needed to work on. But I think closing is the most important. And I was so prepared to say referrals and talk about something else, but I'm going in a different direction. I'm calling an audible, and this is why. When I interview salespeople, and again, like they have to go through a preliminary interview with myself, they have to go through a preliminary interview with the hiring manager, they have to do a case study. So they have to like mock pitch. We give them case study slides. Like they have to pitch to a certain persona in a hospital. They have to, again, like I give them like some advice because like it can't be too ambiguous. Otherwise, like they would all fail. So I like talk to them. I talk them through. I'm like, hey, like you're going to be selling to this persona. This is your role. This is your objective. And this is what I want you to cover. These four key areas. You need to cover rapport building. You need to cover discovery. You need to cover presentation, and you need to cover closing. You're interviewing for a sales role. If you don't ask for the business, or if you don't ask for a close, and again, that could look different at any different level. At ADP, you could be asking for somebody to sign a contract. At here, you could be asking for somebody to send them a patient referral. In a job interview, whether you're a nurse, a lawyer, an investment banker, an engineer, a salesperson, or any other career, and again, like you probably see this a lot on like TikTok and like a lot of like influencers that are saying like, like career influencers that are like, hey, like you got to ask the question. You got to ask the question. The question is, hey, do you have any concern or reservation about my candidacy that I could address at this time? And I hear from hiring managers all the time, meet with all my hiring managers every single week, among other recruiters, among other TA managers, talent acquisition managers. And they kind of think to themselves, they're like, oh, like that's such like an overly used question. Like people shouldn't be asking that. But here's like my hot take on that. You should be asking that question. Everybody should be asking that question. But I only think that about 5% of people actually ask that question in a correct way. I think and again, like going back to sales, like you should always be asking for the close. If you're not asking for the close, somebody's going to think, oh, that guy Adam or that guy Owen was so nice. But what was he here for? You can't just leave people on a hang. That's the sales application of it. But if you're interviewing, and again, like I said earlier, I don't care if you're a recruiter, a nurse, a lawyer, an investment banker, or a salesperson in an interview, I would say in my experience, only 5 to 10% of people that ask me that question actually ask me in the right way. And the right way to ask it is with confidence, with professionalism, with confidence. Like I said, confidence again, because they actually have to know they interviewed well to be able to ask that question, have it come off the right way. But I think those two applications are the most important when it comes to closing.
It's awesome. Yeah. And also I would say probably part of that is actually learning how to respond to a no or uncertainty or whatever that,
We
being
asked
able to
that.
use.
That's one of our main interviewing questions, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. Tell me about how you, again, like if you're looking for like mock interview style questions from a sales recruiter, like here they are. And you probably do the same exact thing. But one of them is tell me about how you navigate being told no. And I'm not going to tell you how to answer that. I think most people know, resiliency, spin selling, hey, like just trying to understand the no, being pushed,
I think
not
that
being
honestly, I
pushy,
think
but
that's the most important part right there is like
yeah.
understanding, is just asking questions to understand so that you can find a solution that might, help them feel better
You
so you
wouldn't
can
you
move
wouldn't
forward.
believe how many salespeople are like, oh, like what is it? Is it a no to me, the product? Like no, like it doesn't matter. Like you should be asking questions to better understand so you get better service. That's the whole idea of consultative based selling right now. And that's what you learn at Cutco. Hint, hint, wink, wink, if you haven't learned it yet in this podcast or this interview or this, whatever case may be.
Awesome. And then the last thing is there anything you want to say or cover as we wrap up?
When it comes to interviewing, there's two key things you need to know. You have hard skills, you have intangible skills. So hard skills being if you're applying to be a nurse or at a hospital or an investment banker or like a lawyer, like you need certain credentials. You need a certain background, like you need certain experience. Like again, like Cutco can help you get there because it'll help you show longevity, it'll help you show development skills, it'll help you build intangible skills, which is on the other side of things. So anytime that I talk to a candidate, if they're lacking on hard skills, I immediately, because I can tell you this because I recruited software engineers at Google, one of the top companies in the world that is constantly focused on bringing on the best talent. You can look up any person at Google, but they won't be able to tell you this. And this is what I'll be able to tell you that if you show up and you're professional and you're polished and you know how to leverage your time and you know what your biggest asset is to that employer, if you don't have all the hard skills yet, like having a computer science degree or having an internship at Google and Amazon or having an internship or building out your own platform, if you're, you self-learned how to code, like all that type of stuff. Again, not to make it super about computer science oriented or engineers, but any application, lawyer, nurse, engineer, salesperson, whatever, your biggest asset is really going to come down to your intangibles and just your personality, how you're able to relate with people. And that's what you learn at Cutco. That's genuinely what you get out of Cutco. So hopefully that was a strong close.
I love that. And I completely agree with that. So I appreciate your time. I'm going to stop the recording